Hi, I'm Marc Childs from FMCG Institute. This is the fourth in our Barcelona Masterclass series, Rethinking Trading Strategy. In this video, we bring you an insightful briefing on commercial opportunity seeking provided by Carl Dempsey, who's the chief executive of the consulting firm Big Blue Bear. Here's Carl.
If I had the silver bullet, would I be standing here today? No. I do have a few things. I think on the whole, you probably already do dabble. I'm probably just going to encourage you to do more. I want to talk about this, but I want to talk about it in the context of my career and what I did for 29 years working for the company that I worked for. And it was always this. I am burdened or gifted with glass half full. I see things very much as an opportunity all of the time. If we can find the opportunity, we will beat the others. We'll be first at the door. Before we start though, I want you to do something for me. So I have two questions that I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to ask you to come up to that board there. The first one I'm going to ask you is this. I want you to take that simple X star and place on the line, which I'll show you in a minute on there, where you believe your answer to this question is. And if you don't want to do this on your company, where you think the industry is, it doesn't really matter, right? So what percentage of you and your team's time today is spent on cost reduction versus finding profitable growth? I love that, yeah. Is that everybody? Yeah? Okay, now, don't run away. So, based on what you said, when you consider your strategic customers, do you have everything you need to grow greater than the rest of your company customers need to grow? One assumes that strategic customers are based on where the shopper is shopping, and that you should be growing profitably much faster with them than you are with the rest of your business. So, simple question. Do you have everything you need? 1, I don't have what I need. 10, I have everything I need. Okay? If you get nothing else from what I talk about today, that simple 1 to 10 tool has been the most valuable tool that I've used in my whole career. And you probably wonder, how the hell did I get away with it for 19 to 20 years? But what that tool does, it asks a very simple question, and then it enables you to drill down into the whys. Okay? So I'll give you an example. I was in a conference in Asia Pacific, and the company group chairman of the company made a comment that global contracts are not beneficial, and that's where all the trade spend goes. So that's the comment that was made, right? And I used 1 to 10 with the audience, and I said, because I was the head of worldwide global customers at the time. 1 to 10, I said, would you just do me a favour? Tell me what percentage of your total trade spend is global contracts. How many do you think went over 2.5, 3, 4? Nobody. And yet a company chairman says that is the biggest amount of money we spend on trade spend. It's not. How much time were the Asia team spending on international contracts? Huge amount of time. Were they spending any time on the 97% that they spent locally? No. So this very simple tool immediately enabled me to drill down into that, and then we move that conversation on. This is the world that I was running, as you see it there. It's the world that most of you are involved in, and some of you might be running all of it or bits of it, whatever it might be. But approximately in 2017, these customers had around $1.5 trillion turnover, depending on which piece of Wikipedia you read and who publishes their accounts, etc. Okay? Honestly, I went to all of those in late 2016 through to the end of 2017 in the role that I had. And the role that I had was pretty much determined by my chairman as to what he thought success looks like. This is what my measurements were: profitable growth. Those strategic customers had to grow 1.5 times greater than the average. The chairman needed to be able to speak to whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted. I needed to add value to the partners of choice. So some of those strategic customers were strategic customers not necessarily for growth. Well, there was a lot of resource that needed to be moved, etc. But overall, they still all had to grow at 1.5 times the company average. I had to own our strategic categories, and I had to beat the competition. Let me be really clear right from the outset. Everything I talk about from an opportunity perspective is where the shopper shops. If you think the speed of change in the next 5 years will be greater than it is today, can you raise your hand? Okay, because we should be building 3-year strategic plans with our customers. How many of us have a 3-year strategic plan with the customer? Just a show of hands. If you do, raise your hand. Okay, one does have to be brave. And I think you've all got models about how to sell and what you do, all of those things, right? Assessing where we need to go and what we need to do sits behind the other elements that Marc talked about, because if we don't assess it, we end up moving the trade spend to the wrong places or having the wrong conversations. So predicting change and planning for success is all about understanding where the shopper shops and gathering data, but also internal perceptions. And I gave you the example earlier on of the chairman that said, international trade spend is the curse. Well, it's not. Can't possibly be. It's only 3 and a bit % of the totality of the spend. Yeah? So going after the wrong thing based on a leader's perception is a big issue. And I don't know, I won't ask you how many of you have those issues, but certainly in my previous life, I had those issues with him. Question: how many of you are thinking about the opportunity that provides versus the cost? Raise your hand if you're thinking about the opportunity. Knock on the door, 3. Okay. Did you raise your hand, Warren? Yeah, I thought you did. Awesome, thank you. Yeah. So the rest of the room, you're either not thinking about it or you're thinking about the cost. I personally believe spotting the opportunity and taking it is much, much harder. Much harder. And you need an element of luck as well as skill in being able to do it. Now, I was asked in my new life to go and present to a global IT community, which I thought was a bit of a stretch. And I asked them what they wanted me to talk about, and they'd seen me do something at the Consumer Goods Forum once. And they said, we want you to come and talk to us about procrastination. But do you understand the cost of delay? How many of you ever sat down and worked out the cost of delay? Did you ever sit down and go, look, just to be clear, I can say no, we can wait, but I think the cost of delay could be somewhere between this and this. Is that what you want to do? Ever done that? Right. What do they normally do? They listen to you. So cost of delay.
Carl, sometimes it's forced upon us when we hit a deadlock situation.
Absolutely.
And you have to decide how long you're going to sit out the deadlock before you negotiate your way out of it.
Which is just what I was going to ask you. But so thank you for predicting that, Warren. So cost of delay, what is it? As you said, it can be deadlock, like Tesco, Carrefour. Anybody had a phone call yet to go and see Tesco, Carrefour? It's coming. It said so in that press release. We are going to talk to global manufacturers about our opportunity. But those that can go in and spot the opportunity and create it and go in at the right time, which is that fine line of sense of being able to do it, yeah, and perhaps are aware of other things that are going on in the industry, which would mean that this was a good thing to do, will probably come out as winners versus those that don't do that. Now, to give an example, I took a real negotiation. So these numbers are relatively real, okay? But I'm not going to say they're totally real, but they're relatively real, but it's to give you an idea of perhaps one way of looking at cost of delay. And you probably do it, but wrong to assume. So, here you go. This is a outcome of some businesses coming together. In the parent business, we have around 645 SKUs, turning over about $800 million. They have asked for an incredible opportunity, a chance to join their club. You've heard all this before. Spend an enormous amount of money to become part of that club, okay? And the business is going, ooh, hold on, wait a minute. This is tough, right? So, time passes. There's no real resolution coming through. Activity starts to happen and conversations start happening that aren't necessarily positive. Okay? And when I sort of sat back and looked at the business and someone said to me, can you dimensionalize this? I said, sure. You've got 645 SKUs. Roughly speaking, 80% of the turnover is coming from 20% of those SKUs, which means 129 are pretty important to them. 30% of your business, let's say, is coming from promotion. It's about 180 million. So the potential impact of them deciding they don't need the rest of the SKUs and cut all your promotions to you is 334 million. Per month, that's 28 million. If they did 50% of it, it's 14 million. And if you were to grow at 2%, you'd get 15.4 million, and you'd be the first mover advantage. So on the one hand, you could see your range destroyed, you could see promotions disappear, and you could be losing 14 million a year, or 14 million a month, or 5 million a month. On the other hand, if you could find the growth opportunity, you could add 15.4 million and have first mover advantage. Now, the obvious question that comes back, by the way, is, are you sure we'll get the 2%? All of it has been about, how do I find a way out of this? How does my team, wonderful team I had, find a way out of this? So we spent an enormous amount of time on the shopper, thinking about the shopper opportunity, plotting where our customers' competitors would go, creating a story that would enable them, and finding a different way to give them the value they wanted rather than a check. The customer that was asking for money with menaces and was going to cost me somewhere in the region of, I don't know, 14 million a month if I hadn't found a way to resolve it, actually had an awful lot of assets that we needed. And only when we stopped thinking that it was a buy-sell relation did we suddenly open up the additional opportunities. They deliver to pharmacists twice a day. Everywhere. In their pharmacy business at that time was about, I don't know, 1.8 billion. They delivered 1.2 billion. They had the capability to deliver 1.2 billion twice a day, which meant our pharmacists didn't have to buy huge sums from us. They could buy small amounts from us. They would also do it cheaper because they already had the white little vans. And they could do it from the point of production through to delivery. That was worth a lot of money to us. Us then negotiating that with them was worth a lot of money to them. Okay? They also could do rapid global NPI for us. And we took a brand which we were developing and we moved it into the United States using them. They could do third-party sales. What was one of our issues? Our reps were not productive because their bag was so big they couldn't do the bag. And the tail brands were dragging down the call, and we couldn't get the calls up to where they needed to be cost effective. So we identified each part of the bag that we could then move to them. And all the time, their big number, I nearly said it then, that would have been outrageous, their big number was coming down and coming down and coming down and coming down. In fact, the money we invest with them actually delivered 13 times the return. Now, we have a rule. I have a very simple negotiation rule. I've always used it. Number one, I never say no. I always say yes, but I need the opportunity to earn 10 times what I invest in your business. Consider your number one customer. What assets may they have that you might want? What assets do you have that they might want? And why would your internal organisation support you in it? And the reason I'm asking you to do this, it's hard to do this. But when you want to identify that big thing, you have to have everybody behind you. So I'm going to ask you to do another thing for me, and it's going to be on this chart again, right? Others? Same? Would you like to be talking opportunities? Would you like to be going in and selling opportunities? Was that a yes? Okay, so our desire is to be sort of around here, right? Okay, thank you. Yes, Mark.
One comment I want to make here is we haven't talked about the human factor enough, in my opinion.
Yes.
And that is, if you were to ask people, why are you not taking risks? It would be because, in many cases, my career is not rewarded.
Yeah, I'd agree.
And this is, I don't want it to be not spoken about, because it's for many people the critical issue is, what thanks do I get for taking risks? Isn't it easier to just cycle last year? And we know it's going to cycle down, but everyone knows that, and I can get away with it. So my question in relation to that, why I raised it, the difficulty, I hope you can answer this, the difficulty is you can't measure and quantify opportunity necessarily.
No.
And therefore, can we be clear about the cost of not going after opportunities? That's the problem.
You can always argue that you can dimensionalize anything, right? You can then argue how relevant is that dimension, right? So I have valued it in this room. I valued it, the way I showed you that original conversation around the 675 SKUs, that is a real example, to get management to think differently. And the question is that fear, and somebody wrote fear on there, is that fear going to happen? And the answer is, could do. And if it does, it's going to cost you a hell of a lot more money to get back. Procrastination, I honestly believe, will cost you more money than seizing the opportunity when it comes along. But you have to dimensionalize it to get your senior leaders to understand it, yeah, and to have a reasonable conversation. So I did actually do something. Can I just show you the slide? I thought at best you'd get to 65% capability in terms of being able to size the opportunity. We got nowhere near 65% capability. Crudely, if we were to divide 270 by 65 and multiply it by 100, we get 470 billion. If we were able to really spot the opportunities and deliver 100%. We're never going to do that, right? If we did 80, well, then we'd get to 332 billion, plus 23%. Now, my business spent an awful lot of time trying to find a few 100 million in cost reduction, spent no time in trying to find 2, 3, 4, 5% growth.
Carl has been a client, colleague and friend for over 20 years, and one of the most expert people I know in global customer management and commercial strategy. This is Marc Childs from FMCG Institute. Thanks for watching.